Hi, I'm Glenn.
And I'm Mark.
And welcome back to Masonic Unity, The Right Stuff. We're here with another interview session with Most Worshipful and Illustrious Daniel McNeil Wilson, who was past Grand Master in 2004. He's a past deputy for the Scottish Rite for New Jersey. He's a past Grand Marshal and countless other titles. So, Dan, it's a pleasure to have you here in the Right Stuff. And we wanted to have this talk to be able to share some of your learnings, some of your experiences in Freemasonry with the rest of the world. So thanks for joining us here.
Well, I appreciate you having me. Before we get started, I just wanted to thank both of you for everything you do for Freemasonry in general.
Thank you.
Scottish Rite, particularly. What you've done with our statewide reunions is just phenomenal. The way the enthusiasm has been just increased tremendously. It's a lot of it is because of the two of you, what you're doing. And also, Glenn, you and your family, your dad and everybody, for what you've done to the museum down here. It's tremendous, and we thank you and Mark and for everything that you do for Freemasonry.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So let's talk about what brought you here today.
Okay.
What was your first exposure to Masonry? What made you want to join our gentle craft?
So I have 4 brothers and sisters. And my father was a Master Mason. He belonged to the Valley of Pittsburgh and NJ Shrine in Pittsburgh. And NJ Shrine and the Valley of Pittsburgh were both huge, and they still are, 4,000 and 5,000 members. And every year, every year the Shrine would rent Kennywood Park. Now, Kennywood Park is like our Six Flags Great Adventure over here.
Right, okay.
But they were so big, they rented the whole park. And my mother would take my brothers and sisters and I, and we would go there. We would just have a ball. I mean, we were young. We were, 8, 9, 10 years old, or maybe even a little bit younger, a little bit older. And also I remember seeing all these guys wearing these funny hats.
Yeah.
But they were having a ball.
Yeah.
And so my exposure was first there. And then my dad never talked to me about Freemasonry, like probably many of your fathers and grandfathers didn't. And so time passed, and I met this girl in Miami, and we got married, and I moved to New Jersey. And we discovered that her family had a big Masonic involvement also. Her grandfather and 3 of his brothers were charter members of Gothic Lodge. Her grandmother was the secretary of her Eastern Star chapter for 53 consecutive years. But her father was not a Mason either, because he wasn't talked to about it other than his mother doing all the Eastern Star stuff. One day he comes to me and says, "We're thinking about joining Freemasonry. Are you interested?" I just said, "You betcha."
That's great.
And the journey began.
Wow. That's great.
That's how it all started.
Great.
What a legacy to
Oh,
begin with.
Yeah.
it all comes down to family.
It was almost always family or very close friends.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. That's great.
So when were you Master Gothic?
I was Master in 1984, and it was the same year that Ed Woods was Grand Master of the state of New Jersey, who was also a member of Gothic Lodge. Matter of fact, when my father-in-law, Harry Steiner, good friend Eddie Layton, and Connie's cousin, George Martin, and we were all entered together. And the person who occupied the East that night for our entered apprentice degree was Most Worshipful Edward R. Woods, who at the time was the junior warden of Gothic Lodge.
Nice.
And so it's just been a continuation.
Wow. Excellent. Now, moving up the chairs to Master, can you tell us about your experiences becoming an officer and moving up the chairs within your lodge?
Gothic Lodge had first of all, it was difficult to get in the line. And so when you entered Gothic Lodge and you agreed to become an officer, you agreed to their rules and regulations, so to speak. And you were assigned a part in all 3 degrees when you first went into the officer line. to go backwards, the master would occupy the east for the master mason degree,
Right.
senior warden, et cetera,
Right.
all the way down to your stewards.
Right.
Everybody had a part to play. And you were expected to learn those parts so that you knew you could do them when the time came.
Yeah.
And Gothic Lodge had very, very good ritualists because we all adhered to that and we all became very close friends because of it. So when it came to doing degree work, we just all knew how to do it. So as you just moved up, you just followed the person in front of you and you did all your work.
Did memorizing come natural for you? Did you have to work at it? Walking the dog, shaving, and reading and...
When I was in my 20s, if I can remember that, when I was in my 20s and 30s, I could memorize things overnight. I've discovered as you get a little older, it's a little bit more difficult. In fact, when I was younger, memorizing just about anything was fairly easy for me.
Which made for a good Grand Marshal years later.
Well, but since you asked me about being Master of Gothic Lodge, you know the story of we raised Danny Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
But most people don't know how that came about.
Yeah, tell us, please.
So Danny Thomas was with his business manager in Washington, D.C., and they were discussing the Veterans Memorial Homes.
Okay.
And they wanted Danny Thomas to do the intro to the movie when the band stops playing. And while they're doing this talking, and they were talking to Tom Doherty, by the way, who was the director of hospital visitation. His manager, who was a Master Mason, said to Tom Doherty that Danny Thomas would like to become a Master Mason. And they asked him if they could help him out. Tom Doherty, who was a past Grand Master of New Jersey, said, hold on. So he calls Ed Woods, who was the Grand Master of New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
And he tells him the story, and Ed Woods says, I'll get right back to it. He called me, and he said, Dan, can Gothic Lodge put on all 3 degrees in one day? And I said, absolutely. I said, why? And Ed said, well, there's a very important person down in Washington, D.C. right now who wants to join the fraternity. So I'm thinking, well, who is it? He said, I can't tell you just yet.
Mm-hmm.
I said, okay. So I went home that night, and first thing I said to my wife, I'm going to be raising Ronald Reagan. But as it turned out, it was Danny Thomas, and the reason he wanted to join the fraternity so bad was he wanted to become a Shriner, so he could help the children just like he did at St. Jude's.
Yeah.
So we did the one-day class over at the Scottish Rite Cathedral in Trenton. We had 900 people there. The day started off rather difficult. He was 3 hours late because he was in New York City, and as they left the city, there was an accident in the Lincoln Tunnel.
Yeah.
So they were held up for 3 hours. So he didn't get there till noon. He had to do the preface to when the band starts playing, and then we did all 3 degrees.
Wow.
We just all interchanged our parts.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Keith Grazer was in the East for the entered apprentice degree. Jack Palmer, Fellowcraft.
Mm-hmm.
I did the Master Mason degree, and then Ed Woods with the Grand Staff in the second section.
That's great.
So, and I still have all of his documentation, his application.
That's fabulous.
Yeah, it was quite a day.
That's fabulous.
But we were just, I've been just so fortunate. I've always been surrounded by terrific people.
Yeah.
And so I've just been blessed in that response.
Yeah. Now moving up through the chairs, I'm sure you had a lot of mentors in your life, in Masonry and outside of Masonry. Who were some of your Masonic mentors, and what kind of lessons did they share with you that helped you to be where you are now?
Well, without question, most worshipful brother Ed Woods was the man of the hour for me as far as Masonically. Whenever I had a question about just about anything, I could call him. And he wasn't a guy who was Grand Master, who was all uppity. He was just a down-to-earth, great guy that anybody could call and talk to him. I could call him with any little situation that I didn't understand or needed counsel on or whatever, because he was an excellent District Deputy Grand Master. he had this commanding voice, but it was gentle at the same
Yeah.
time. And he was one of the 2 or 3 best Grand Marshals we ever had, and he was also one of the 2 or 3 best Grand Masters we ever had. And he always just told me, just think things through. Don't go off half-cocked and make unwise decisions at the moment because you haven't thought it through.
Yeah.
Always sleep on it, just like sending an email today.
Yeah.
Never hit
Yeah.
the send button until tomorrow morning.
Very true, yeah.
And so Ed Woods was definitely the main man when it came to Masonically.
That's great.
Those are some good lessons to
Yeah.
really take
Yeah.
with you.
Yeah. Now, in life, of course, my father was a tremendous individual, just like your dad was. I've never met your family, Mark, but you know, like I said, I had 4 other brothers and sisters. And my father married, family, a full-time job. He went to school at night and earned 3 engineering degrees.
Wow.
He was the superintendent of the Sunday schools, and he in the community he was the superintendent of our Little League, and in our township that could have been 2,000 to 3,000 kids.
Yeah.
And so he just was always doing other things for other people.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of learned from him that he's one of the 2 or 3 smartest men I ever met.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah, that's great. That's
So
great.
that's where I try to get my background from.
That's great. Again, it comes down to family.
Yeah.
Yep. Once again.
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. Now, your years after being master on the path to Grand Master, tell us a little bit about your experiences there.
So the history between, and I hope I don't go off too long on this.
The time is yours.
The history between Matt Mariah and Gothic Lodge has been closely intertwined. Lou Parker was Grand Master and Horace Carl was his Grand Marshal. When he became Grand Master, Tom Doherty became his Grand Marshal.
So Tom was the Grand Marshal for Horace.
Horace Carl.
Okay.
When Tom Doherty became Grand Master, Edgar Pepler became his Grand Marshal.
Right.
When Edgar Pepler became Grand Master, Ed Woods became his Grand Marshal.
Right.
When Ed Woods became Grand Master, George Martin became his Grand Marshal. So you would think that there was a succession going here,
Yeah.
but in stepped Ken Sternkoff 4 years before George Martin considered running to be Grand Master, and he asked me to be his Grand Marshal. So I was, but then George wanted Keith Grazer to do it, and Keith couldn't, but he became his secretary to the Grand Master. So when I had the opportunity to become Grand Master, I asked Keith to be my Grand Marshal.
Right.
So now we're just waiting for Keith to do something.
Sounds
Yeah,
good.
yeah. Can flip-flop back.
But you know, so after Grand Marshal, which by the way, I don't want to disappoint anybody, but it is the best job in Grand Lodge. The best job.
I can attest.
Well, you can attest to that, of course.
This may be a descending boat for right now.
So when I was done being Grand Marshal in 1987, Ken Sternkoff suggested that I run for the Masonic Charity Foundation to become a trustee there. So I was elected trustee, and I served 2 terms, 6 years. And when that was done, I'm kind of deciding what I was going to do, and I was thinking about maybe becoming or running to be elected Grand Lodge trustee, but our deputy Grand Secretary passed away, and so
And who was that at the time?
I'll get back to you on that one.
Okay.
And because I can picture his face. But it was recommended that I then run be elected the Deputy Grand Secretary, so that I could assist Ray Bellini with everything he had going on. So I ran for Deputy Grand Secretary, and I was elected for 7 consecutive years. Then came the decision about running for Junior Grand Warden.
So what was that decision like?
That was difficult.
Yeah.
We all have thoughts or ideas about how the fraternity should be run or shouldn't be run. And so I made the decision that that I thought I could contribute something to the fraternity. Before I made a final decision, of course, I talked to my wife, and her answer was classic. She said, just shakes her head and said, Dan, I know you want to do it, as long as you're going to do it. Do it while we're young enough to enjoy it.
Yeah, very true.
So I said, okay.
Very true.
So we filed our petition, along with 2 others, all seeking the job of Junior Grand Warden, and I was fortunate to have been elected in that. And then going through the elected line was a learning experience in itself.
Yeah.
So,
Why do you say that? What kind of learning experience was it?
You really don't know what's going on in this entire state until you're subjected to the entire state.
Okay.
You know, the further along you go in Freemasonry, you realize that there's more and more issues that need to be dealt with.
Right.
There's there's so many personalities.
Yeah.
Dave Chase was the Grand Master when I became Junior Grand Warden. And he had a meeting with us, with his elected line. It was Dave Chase, Larry Plaskett, Bob Miller, and myself, or the progressive members. And then it was Ray Bellini, Bill Morris, and Earl Sutton, or the Grand Secretary, Deputy, and Treasurer. And Dave said to me, have you thought about what you want to do when you're the Grand Master? And I said, well, one of the things I want to do is I would like to do the same thing that Grand Lodge of Ohio did and have a one-day class. But it's going to require a lot of planning, a lot of preparation, and I'd like to get started with that whenever it would be okay with you. And he said, well, I just got an invitation to go to the Grand Lodge of Ohio. He said, why don't you go and represent me and talk to them to see how they
That's great.
how they did it. So I did. I went out there, and I came back with three ring binders about 4 inches thick about how they planned everything. Now, when they did theirs, and they did all 3 just like we had planned on doing here, they raised 7,800 Master Masons. Wow. And you know, I don't know how many Scottish Rite or Shriners.
Yeah.
But you know, they were the largest jurisdiction in the world.
Yeah.
At the time, they had 130-some thousand, whatever. They're still the largest. In Pennsylvania, they toy with each other.
They argue with each other
as to how you catch your fourth, you know. So, but anyway, so I owe a lot of credit to Dave Chase for allowing me to do that, and he supported me throughout the whole thing. Larry Plaskett supported me, Bob Miller supported me, and the members that followed me were a tremendous help. I mean, behind me was Bob Sheridan, Doug Policastro, John Ryan, and then Ray Bellini, Bill Morris, and Earl Sutton. And think of what that group of people has done both individually and collectively.
The group,
Pretty impressive.
And it was, once again, I'm just surrounded by terrific people. And they all just did so much, each one of them. So we planned our one-day class and it went off very well.
That's
You know,
wonderful.
the one-day class was controversial back then. Now it seems to be more widespread now. It's accepted. I mean, it's been brought in New Jersey. How many people did you raise on that day? Do you have a ballpark?
Yep. When we really started planning it, when we decided, and I say we because we always talked about this as a group, I knew that I had to get someone who would be the chairman, who just had the personality to deal with the Shrine, Scottish Rite, and your Blue Lodge members.
Right.
So I went to Dave Glatnick.
Yep.
And I told him what I wanted to do, and I said, will you be the chairman? And he said, yes. And so I just got to let him run with it.
Right.
He organized, and he was bringing people in that I didn't even know. And we would have meetings, and we were really hoping we'd get 500 people. I mean, that was our goal. We wanted 500 people, and as it turned out, we needed 5 locations.
Right.
Right.
We used the Scottish Rite Cathedral, Lincoln Park, Salam Shrine Center, Livingston. We rented a high school auditorium in Egg Harbor,
Yep.
Fellowship Center, and then right here at the Trent Masonic Temple. And we raised over 1,700 new Masons.
Wow.
Yeah.
We had over 600 Scottish Rite and over 300 Shrine members.
That's amazing.
What was the scope of the whole day was enormous.
Mm-hmm.
As it turned out, over 4,000 Masons participated that day,
Yeah.
because everybody needed a mentor.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
We needed 5 complete sets of degree teams
Yep.
at each place.
For each degree.
For each degree.
Right.
We needed registration people for all 5 places, and we needed to feed everybody.
Yep.
So there was over 5,000 or over 4,000 people participated, and it was just run so smoothly. Bill Morris set up the registration.
Mm-hmm.
Bill and I had gone to New York because they were going to have a one-day class.
Right.
We wanted to learn what they did right and what they did wrong,
Right.
and we learned. Well, he learned.
Yeah.
I just kind of tagged along. I didn't know what he was doing.
Right.
And we set it up, and the whole day just went so smooth. And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, there were a total of 31,000 Master Masons in the state of New Jersey.
That's fabulous.
Wow.
Like I said, it was the team, and under my predecessors, we had someone who had to be in charge of ritual at each one of the 5 spots.
Mm-hmm.
Each one of those 3 guys took a spot, and they were in head charge of ritual.
That's
and
great.
2 other people.
Yeah.
So, and I had a past grand marshal at each one of the 5 venues, and they were kind of in charge of herding the cattle.
Yes. Yes.
So, it was just a tremendous day. But
I remember it because I was in one of the ritual teams at the Scottish Rite. So I remember just the feeling in the air. It was fabulous.
yeah,
Electric.
And something to be proud of. Because I remember hearing afterwards, you going around, Danny, going, he was part of my one-day class, and now he's a worshipful master.
Yeah.
And now he's on the grand staff.
Yeah.
So you brought in so many leaders at that time, guys who thought that, the one-day class would be a show up and then you'd never see him again.
right.
But these guys have stayed with it,
Yeah.
they have led the craft, and they still continue to contribute back.
Well, one of the main reasons that I felt we needed to do it was we were recycling too many of the leaders.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like one person might be literally in 3 or 4 different bodies and be an officer in 3 or 4 different.
Mhm.
So we were running out of people, and I thought we had to really bolster the leadership team. And we were also hoping, we never thought we'd get to 1,700, by the way. Like I said, Dave and I were hoping for 500. I mean, we were praying for 500, and then all of a sudden it just snowballed. But we were hoping that the people we brought in the one-day class would then bring in their friends.
Right.
And we didn't realize how well that was going to work out. My own lodge had, I think we've had 7 or 8 past masters now out of that one-day class. And I always made the offer to everybody who participated on March 19th, 2005.
Right.
Not that I can forget the day.
Yeah.
But I always said, when you become master of your lodge, I want to know, and I'd be honored to come and present the ancient charges to you.
Oh,
Wow.
that's great.
And I've done that. I ran out of fingers and toes.
Yeah.
I'm telling you how many times I did
That's
it.
great.
But that offer is still out there for anybody.
Fabulous. Yeah.
But so it turned out 100% better
Yeah.
than we even anticipated or hoped for.
Yeah.
So we're happy campers.
That's such a wonderful memory that how you changed the craft.
We. And it's funny, Mark, you mentioned the one-day class is now accepted. I was interviewed by a magazine, and it was the Fireman's Magazine of the East Coast or New Jersey, whatever it was. And the guy said, why did you do it? Everybody was saying you couldn't do it, you couldn't do it. I said, I guess I'm like Forrest Gump. I was just too stupid to realize I couldn't do it. So we went ahead and did it.
Do it.
It's good to be the Grand Master.
If it feels right, you do it.
So that's all true stories, and so yeah, we're real
That's
proud
great.
of that.
That's great. Now, going past your years as Grand Master, tell us about what you did and how you stayed involved.
When you're done being Grand, you know, when you're going through the elected line, you're back on the Charity Foundation as one of the trustees, and then for the 2 years following. So when those 2 years were just about up, I hate to squeal on someone who's deceased, but I'm going to tell you what he did. I was at a function with Dave Glatley and Verdon Skipper, and we're just talking, and I said, you know, my time on the foundation is just about up. I said, I got to stay involved a little bit, not like I was, but just a little. I want to keep my feet in there just a little bit. I said, you know, I came into the fraternity because of the shrine. So I think I'm going to go down to Crescent Temple and maybe go through their divan or just help out some way or another. And Skipper says, now, Dan, I don't want you to do that just yet. He says, we have a meeting at the Central Valley tonight for an officer selection team. And he said, just don't do anything yet.
Right.
I said, all right. So Skip calls me the next morning and said, congratulations, Dan, you're the captain of the guard in the Rose Croix line.
Okay.
I didn't know for 3 years that there was never a meeting. Like I said, I didn't want to squeal on Skip.
He has a habit of doing that.
But so I went through Rose Croix line.
Yes.
What's that, 6 years, I guess we did that.
Yep.
Great line.
Yes.
Oh, it's the best.
I think we're all past most.
Yes.
Yeah.
That could be an oxymoron for me, but yeah. So then, you know, we helped out at the Central Valley a lot, as much as I could. And Dave Glatley then came to me and said that he had to retire as the deputy in 2 years. Skipper was already off. Bob Sheridan had to retire in 2 years. What's called retire your age out at 75.
Right.
Dave had to age out because you can only serve as a deputy for 9 years.
Right.
So Dave said, I think we would like you to come on as an active member of Supreme Council. And I really hesitated at that because I was always what I called a Blue Lodge guy. I wasn't an attendant body guy. I never really participated in Scottish Rite or the Shrine or York Rite or any of them because I was strictly Blue Lodge. I spent thousands of hours at the Masonic home volunteering, and I didn't really know enough about any of the other organizations.
Right.
And they said it's leadership, and why don't you give it a consideration? So I did, and I had to be interviewed by the Sovereign Grand Commander, who at the time was John William McNaughton. So we had an extensive interview, and he asked me a lot of questions that are or will remain within that interview, and so he said, "Yep," he said, "I'm going to recommend you to become one of the actors." You have to be voted on,
Right.
and A Cube rejects. So there are 55 voting members, and fortunately, enough guys didn't know me well enough, so they elected me. So I was fortunate, and I was elected as an active member.
Okay.
And we had a meeting also with Doug Policastro at the time, that in 2 years when Bob Sheridan, I was really going to be in training for 2 years is what it meant. And in 2 years when Bob Sheridan had to retire, then Doug would be offered the job as being an active member. And Doug knew a lot more about Scottish Rite than I did,
Right.
because he'd been really involved in it for a much longer period. But that's what happened. Dave went out as a deputy, and I took over as deputy, and then my two actives were Doug and Dave Glatley.
Wow. Okay.
But what I discovered, so I was a deputy for 3 years, and it was a lot of work. It was more than I anticipated, and I had so many other things going on at the time, so many other issues, this, that, the next thing, that I said, I think I would be more valuable as being an active, not as a deputy.
Mhm.
So we made the switch.
Okay. Now, when you talk about the responsibilities of active versus a deputy, can you give us a little bit more understanding about the difference between the two?
Generally, an active is in charge of one area or one valley or one project or whatever, because we have enough to do that.
Right.
Whereas, you know, the deputy is in charge of everything.
Mhm.
You know, the buck falls here.
Right.
The deputies have a lot more meetings to go to up in Lexington.
Mhm.
It's much more time consuming, and Doug does a very good job at it.
Mhm.
So we all made the right decision.
Okay, good to know.
So you pull back just being active. Did you do anything while being active? Because I see your shirt, and it says not just a man, a Mason.
Well, so you're sucking me into this.
That was a softball throw if there ever was one. Yeah.
Of course, I didn't wear the shirt for no reason at
No,
all.
yeah, not at all, not at all.
So Commander McNaughton wrote a book called Reclaiming the Soul of Freemasonry.
Mhm.
And the way the book was written was based on a survey that Scottish Rite had done, and they used a firm called Circone Brown. And we surveyed 1,000 men across the United States and gave them all kinds of questions about the type of person they are, the type of organization they would or would not want to belong to, what their moral values are, all kinds of questions in that vein. And at the end, when they collected all the data, we found out that Freemasonry is really alive and well, or the concept of Freemasonry is alive and well. The men want to join organizations. Men want to be part of an organization with other like-minded men.
Mhm.
They want that. They don't want to be isolated. We also knew that people, their time is precious,
Right.
which once again goes back to the one-day thing.
Yeah.
But we know that the concept is there. So Commander McNaughton formed a task force of 6 people, and he had asked me to be one of the 6.
Wonderful.
For a couple of reasons. Myself and Gail Kemp, who was a past Grand Master of Indiana, that once we put together the whole project, would we be willing to go to the various Grand Lodges around the Northern Masonic jurisdiction,
Mhm.
tell everybody the program,
Right.
what we're doing, what the value of it is, and let them know, most specifically, that we're not doing this to steal your members to come into Scottish Rite.
Right.
We're doing it to grow Freemasonry. And that was the whole concept, and that's what we did. And the tough part was convincing the Grand Masters of the other states that we wanted to help them.
Yeah.
And the reason the Commander McNaughton asked Gail Kemp and I, past Grand Master Gail Kemp, is having served in that position, we could go and talk to the other Grand Masters and explain to them, because we've experienced it.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we did. I've been to every state except for 2, and I plan on trying to get into those states as soon as possible. And there's other states I've been to a lot of times.
Yeah.
We've countless trips to Illinois. Don't fly into Chicago unless you have to.
Sadly, I know.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, I was one of these Masons that said, you know what, we're losing members every year. Maybe it's time that I really did go sit on the sideline and let somebody else take over, because I have nothing to offer.
Mhm.
There's, let someone else do it for a change.
Yeah.
And when this whole program was introduced to me, it was like a shot of vitamin B12. Man, I just got right back into the game. I was so excited about it. I couldn't wait to go out and talk about it. And so Not Just a Man, a Mason was really a revolution in 6 words.
Mhm.
And it's growing and growing and growing. And so we always learn. And what we learned from it was what do you do when you want to take a trip? You Google it. You go for an internet search.
Right.
And so when people went for an internet search about Freemasonry, they found out all kinds of things that just weren't true.
Conspiracies and all their own.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a whole other session.
Yeah, that's later.
So what we did is we created what's called the front door to Freemasonry, and that's the website beafreemason.org.
Right.
And the website was designed so that when someone Googled Freemasonry or some form of it, would either be taken to the Grand Lodge of Ohio website, which is a tremendous website, it's freemasonry.com,
Right.
or beafreemason.org. Now, what was good about freemason.org, no matter where you were in the country, let's say you live in Texas,
Okay.
it would come up and it would tell you about Freemasonry. Do you want some more information? You would say yes. You know, it's all very simple. And it's, we're not asking you for anything personal. We transfer you to the Grand Lodge of Texas website.
Yep.
But everything was done in uniform.
Right.
Every website looked identical. So it wasn't 50 different programs.
Right.
It was one program with follow-up, and it was all the same no matter what state you're in.
Yeah.
And, it was introduced at the Conference of Grand Masters in February of 2020. Since then, until today, well, until last Monday, because I get the updates once a week on Monday.
Okay.
There have been 27,000 inquiries about joining Freemasonry.
Amazing.
And of those 27,000, 894, as of last Monday, were for the state of New Jersey.
Nice.
Great.
Now, what's even better for New Jersey is Lenny Vanderhorn, our junior Grand Warden, is handling each and every one of them with his membership committee.
That's great.
So rather than an inquiry sitting idle,
Right.
Yeah. Which you're going to lose them.
you're going to lose them. His committee goes and contacts them.
That's
So
great.
if you think about it, almost 900 people just off the street inquiring about Freemasonry, and now they're really interested. We think it's a tremendous addition. Now, we know for a fact, you're saying, what's my next job? We know for a fact that a lot of the leads, and that's what they are not being followed up.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the new Sovereign Grand Commander, Pete Samick, I had a meeting with him last week, I guess it was sometime. He asked me if I would, in addition to what I'm doing, start contacting all of the contacts who received the leads. Each state has a designated coordinator.
Okay.
Like ours is Lenny Vanderhorn.
Yeah.
Every state has one. And he's asked me if I would start coordinating with each and every one of the states, find out how many they've contacted, how many have actually joined, which we don't know.
Yeah.
Because we said that we would not interfere with the other states. So we don't. We get them the information, and now it's up to you to do.
Yeah.
And the whole project is in coordination with the Southern Masonic Jurisdiction
Okay.
and Shriners International.
Right.
That's a big task in and of itself, to get
Yeah.
3 sovereign bodies working together.
Yeah.
Well, when you think about the Shrine a few years ago wanted to divest themselves of Scottish Rite, that was a big task. And Dave Glatley deserves all the credit. He's the one who put the 3 bodies together.
Yeah.
Fortunately, Jeff Souter, who was the Imperial Potentate, is a past Grand Master of Kansas. He also had a one-day class and believes in it.
Right.
And so they just meshed very nice. And with HIPAA regulations, and I know you both know all about HIPAA.
Yep.
Information privacy is just paramount.
Paramount.
So what we've done, all of the data that's collected is done through Shriners International Hospital System, which is probably one of the most secure systems in the world.
Right.
Because that information is also private. So it's been a tremendous success, and What do I think about Freemasonry in the future? I think the Northern Masonic jurisdiction is the pinnacle of Freemasonry in the world today.
Mhm.
Well, we had the resources, we had the manpower, we had the knowledge. We have tremendous personnel up in Lexington.
Mhm.
Their knowledge of all of this stuff is beyond belief. And the firm we've hired, Cerconi Brand, is also a wonderful organization to deal with. And I think the future of Freemasonry looks bright.
Good.
I really think that we are on an uptick. I know that there's a lot of people like me who were becoming complacent
Mhm.
because, we just thought there wasn't anything else we could do, who have now been regenerated.
Yeah,
You get the juices
we
flowing.
need a project.
And I see the future of Freemasonry as being very, very bright.
Nice.
So what would you say to one of these new leads, someone who's on our YouTube site, please subscribe below, and
But there's a thing where it tells you to
Oh
say.
yeah, oh yeah.
and they want to know, what makes me a Freemason? What will make me a better leader? We talk about making good men better.
Yeah.
Yep.
In your mind, with all the positions you've had, what do you think is the answer that you'd like to have them know?
This is what I do personally. Periodically, I get all the trust reports.
Mm-hmm.
Not all, but a lot of them. And I'll read the master's message.
Mhm.
And some of them are very inspiring,
Mhm.
and some are dull. But I go back to our degrees that we took, our first 3 degrees, especially the Master Mason degree where we do our obligation.
Right.
And I review that obligation constantly. And when I do that, I feel that it makes me a better person. And when I tell people about the degrees that they will take should they join, I tell them it's all about what's in your heart. It's how about you feel about other people. Do you want to have communion with a like-minded person? Do you believe in a supreme being? And I'll ask them right up front about it. And I just talk about trying to be a better person, a better father, a better husband, all the things that we do in Freemasonry.
Right.
And it's boilerplate, it's textbook.
Yeah.
It's what we do.
Right.
So I just kind of have that conversation just off the record, just like you do.
Right.
Very nice. Very nice. And throughout your years, how do you feel like Freemasonry's changed?
Well, it's changed in that everybody's time needs instant gratification.
Mhm.
And that requires people. To, we as an organization have to be able to accommodate a person's time, AKA the one-day class.
Right.
And we have to understand that with this instant gratification people need, perhaps they don't like to memorize all the degree work. Maybe the degrees aren't the most important thing in the world.
Mhm.
They're the most important thing to a lot of people, but not to everybody.
Right.
It's what we teach in the degrees which is important.
Right.
So what's changed is the fact that we need to accommodate people's time. We have to respect the fact that in today's society, most families have 2 working adults, if they're married,
Yep.
or if they have a spouse or a partner. And so their time is valuable to them, and we have to honor that time and commitment. We have to realize
Definitely.
that we have to be respectful of them.
Mhm.
But the way it's changed also, because of the diminishing numbers, we also have to realize that certain degree work isn't as important, and you don't have to do degree work to be a lodge officer.
Mhm.
We need business people to be lodge officers,
Mhm.
and then, don't strike me down, we can have degree teams.
Right.
I think degree teams are very valuable because when we do a degree, it's not for us, it's for the person that we're giving the degree to.
Yeah, most definitely.
So it's changed dramatically. Some aspects are good, some are bad,
Mhm.
but I truly believe that there's going to be a big rebound happening.
Excellent. Excellent.
Well, we look forward to that,
Yes.
and we look forward to going through that with you.
I hope so.
Yeah, good.
Well, anything you want to say to our viewers in closing?
Well, I'd just like to thank both of you once again, like I did in the beginning, for all the work that you've done, for the work that your family's done. And to you viewers out there, go to beafreemason.org, beafreemason.org. We'll talk to you soon.
Excellent. Thanks, and take care.
Thank you very much,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Thank you. See you later.